Our next speaker is Karl. I have a request of you, Karl. I've never pronounced your name before. I don't want to butcher it. I'll ask you to please share that pronunciation with us, but I do know your title, and it is Scientific Publication. It looks like he's done a lot of that. Scientific publication. Welcome, Karl.
Jalkanen.
Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Toastmaster. Today I'm going to talk about a little bit different. It's called scientific publication. I'm a senior research scientist at Gilead Sciences in Laverne. I'm also editor-in-chief of Current Physical Chemistry from Betham Science Publishers out of Dubai. And I'm also an adjunct professor of biotechnology at Azusa Pacific. So, overview. Why publish? What to publish? Where to publish? And some people have talked about what are the consequences of publishing, making your views, research, or products known, and conclusions. Is it worth the effort for you? So why publish? What are the reasons to publish in science? Well, to present the results of your clinical research on a new biopharmaceutical therapeutic to treat disease or a condition that is both safe and effective. So the only way people are going to know about your research is if you publish. And I think, as Ralph Dieter knows, and many people who are in academics, there's an old saying, you publish or you perish. Second, present validation of methods to use to monitor critical quality attributes of your investigational new drug and device. So it's not just developing a therapeutic or a device. You have to have methods. The FDA, the EMA, which are the European medical agencies, Anvisa out of Brazil, the Japanese, the Russians, Turkey, they all want to make sure that when you present evidence, right, like Michael Alexander talked about in court, what is the basis of your evidence? How have you validated the methods that you used or the assays? Then you have to present the method to monitor the concentration of your drug or therapeutic in human subjects, pharmacokinetics and pharmacoimmunogenicity. Like Lois Sicking said, like, with the math in her fire simulations in biopharmaceutical industry, you actually have to validate the methods that you're using to monitor the drug concentration, and not only the drug concentration, but also the kinetics. Does it metabolize in your body? And what are the metabolites, and do they actually have toxic effects? Then you have to present validation of your diagnostic method, device used to diagnose. Everybody knows we have x-rays, we have MRI, we have many methods to actually determine it. We even have a COVID test, right? During the COVID pandemic, one of the important things to do is, do you have COVID or not? Same thing with many other diseases. So it's very important to validate the method, because you don't want to have a false positive and half your workforce staying home because you have a method which is giving a lot of false positive. Similarly, you don't want false negatives where people have COVID and then they come to work and then they pass it on to everybody else. So it's very important that you validate the methods and you know what the statistics of those are. Then you want to educate pharmacists, nurses, physicians, and the public about new diagnostic tools and treatments. Then you have to convince the FDA, the EMA, Anvisa, Russian medical authorities, International of Health, World Health Organization, that your therapeutic, your drug treatment, your device should be approved for use. Because just because you actually have a very good method doesn't mean it's going to be approved. There's many drugs which are approved in Europe which aren't approved in the US. And similarly, there's many drugs which are approved in the US which aren't approved in Europe. The classic example is Sputnik, which is the vaccine which you could store at room temperature in Russia, was not approved in America. AstraZeneca, which actually has a very similar COVID vaccine, similar to the Russians, was not approved in the US. We only had Moderna, Pfizer, and J&J. Why? That's for you to understand why. Then to protect your intellectual property and to gain distribution, market exclusivity, and protection. That's what it was. The deal that Pfizer and Moderna made with President Trump and subsequently Biden gave exclusivity to these drug companies to market their and actually to pay for their COVID vaccine. So what to publish? As a scientist, you want to publish original research and development of analytical and statistical results from ethics boards approved new investigational drug, therapeutic, and device studies. As we all know, a professor at Harvard, who actually, I think, resigned the last couple of days, there's a concept called plagiarism. That's why you have to do original research and development. You can't pinch other people's work and claim it as your own, which is called plagiarism. which in many cases may require FTA, EMA, Anvisa, Argentine, New Zealand, Russian, Italian, Swedish government agency, and institutional ethic board approvals. When you do human clinical studies, it's very important that you actually do consent, informed consent. Your people who are taking your drugs, they have to actually know. Everybody knows about the classical case of Tuskegee, which happened with African males who were actually exposed to syphilis. And people, what they don't realize is at the time that study studied, there was no antibiotic, there was no cure. So ethically, what they did was okay. But as soon as an antibiotic, penicillin, became available, they were ethically, morally responsible to actually provide the treatment, which they didn't do. So, and one of the reasons is even at Nuremberg, right? The medical doctors in both Japan and Germany were doing experiments on human prisoners of war. Actually, even in America, a lot of our military soldiers, they're exposed to treatments for chemical weapons and also biological weapons. So the problem also is informed consent wasn't there. And actually, after Nuremberg, the Helsinki Accords were actually came into effect that says you have to have an ethics board and an institutional board to approve your human trials. Very important to have informed consent. So where to publish? If you want to protect your intellectual property rights, you have to patent the information. It's very important because if you publish your results in peer-reviewed scientific medical journals first, it's called public disclosure. Then you don't get your copyright and patent rights. So it's very important that you do your patents, and it's very expensive. So the patents have to be done before you actually publish in peer-reviewed medical journals. But it's very important to publish in peer-reviewed journals because that gives the research credibility. Even though the FDA or the EMA might approve a drug, doesn't mean it's safe. The classic case is thalidomide. Those who are too young don't remember, but John F. Kennedy gave the FDA worker a special award, courtesy, because she didn't approve thalidomide in the United States. It was approved in Europe, in Canada, Australia, many countries, and it caused birth defects in the babies of mothers who actually were prescribed this. So just because a drug is approved by the FDA or doesn't mean it's great. So that's why you have to have peer review, and peer review is what is the sound scientific method. Then there's the Orange Book by the FDA for generic drugs and the Purple Book for biologics. So, and what you do is you disclose, you publish in these books so that the generic company comes after the patent has expired and the exclusivity has given up, that it allows the drugs to be made by the generic company and in biosimilars, which are a lot of times from India and other countries. But it's very important because the cost of the drugs comes down sometimes 90% when the generic or the biosimilar comes to the market. And there you should publish also in pharmaceutical, nursing, and medical trade journals to make it available to people. So results and consequences, you become known and may become under attack for your views, results, and developments due to scientific reasons, political, ethical, moral, religious, and economic reasons. There was a big controversy about why Sputnik and AstraZeneca's vaccine was not available in America and other parts of the world because it can be stored in room temperature, whereas Pfizer and Moderna had to be stored at -70. And there was even big consequences of why vaccines weren't distributed to the third world, but that's another question. So here's an example of the kind of work that we published at Gilead. This is a paper with Azusa Pacific. Roberta Bertira was an intern with us at Gilead, and her professor in Azusa Pacific was Son Kim from Korea. So it's very important that you publish the results and you teach the young people how to publish, and not just novels and history and fiction, but also scientific work. So conclusion, is it worth it? Yes, absolutely. You help do your part, make contribution to develop life extending and saving diagnostic tools, therapeutics, treatments, which can improve the quality of the unborn, infants, children, adolescents, middle-aged, and even some of us senior citizens and retired veterans. Knowledge and experience are not inexpensive, but the alternative, ignorance and lack of knowledge and understanding, can not only be expensive, but devastating. For example, the Spanish flu, the Black Plague. Representation of R&D by both spoken and written word, scientific and medical journals has allowed man to share and improve the quality of life. Thank you.